So I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute or two to go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience. Mr. Kirkpatrick, if you'd like to go ahead and go first.
Okay. Thank you again for coming out and supporting me. I'm joined here this evening by my wife, my daughter Kayla, my parents, Jim and my stepmom Bobby, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, and many supporters that are here to see this thing through. So thank you again for coming out. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Hello, everybody. My name is Juan Gonzalez. I'm here on the run for sheriff, and I'd like to thank the Kingsville Record, Texas A&M University for having us, and any other organization may have taken part in this. I also am accompanied by my wife, Lourdes Gonzalez. I am the proud father of Juan Carlos and Catherine Gonzalez. And real quick, I'm a 1982 graduate of H.M. King High School, a Desert Storm veteran, Desert Shield, and Liberation of Kuwait veteran, honorably discharged veteran. I'm a Purple Heart recipient, and I'm currently the Chief Deputy of Kleberg County Sheriff's Office. I've been there for 8 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the topics. Now, obviously, you guys are running to be the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Kleberg County. What would you guys say is the most prevalent challenge, or some of the challenges facing law enforcement today? Mr. Kirkpatrick?
Well, I think right now, if you want to stop and look at it, what's going on in the country, and I'll dive into this more in depth and concerns with what I would like to call an immediate challenge that are facing our community right now. I know everybody's probably seen the news. They've probably seen things that are coming out, and I'm referring to our potential threats with child abductions. In fact, I think the task force received a call today from the high school in reference to this matter. I believe that whether those are considered hoaxes or not, I believe they're, in my mind, I think that they're very serious. And as I think that the sheriff should have a safety plan with the KISD, the Independent School District, inclusive of that of Rivera, that of Ricardo, that we ensure that our school district is that this is priority, and we want to be the first responders out there to have a plan in place to ensure that our kids are safe.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, what would you say are some of the challenges or most prevalent challenges facing law enforcement today?
The challenges facing law enforcement today, we are like a micro-society of nationwide problems, and the nationwide problem, the current one right now, is the terrorism that occurs, and like my opponent mentioned, certain things that happen within the county. The civil unrest that goes on, the officer shootings that happen, things like that. Other challenges that we face are body-worn cameras. Do the public want us to wear body-worn cameras? So obviously the answer is yes. Every officer in my department will wear body-worn cameras and be accountable every day for making them operational and having them working. The criminal prosecution of officers. Real lightly, I'm just touching on these subjects real lightly. I will have a department that is transparent. I look forward to having maybe a civilian review board to review some of the issues that happen with when officers contact the public. Recruitment and retention. I'm happy to say that in the past 8 years, we've had our highs and our lows. We went, since the Eagle Ford shell came about, we lost 70% of our officer force, and we are currently up the manpower. We're 20 officers within the department. Social media. Everybody's got a phone. Everybody has a YouTube account, and everybody's on Twitter. These are issues that officers face every day. They're being not only recorded with their own cameras, but they're being recorded with everybody else's camera, every call that you go to. And here's the scariest one for me, because this does occur. The open carry law, which was discussed earlier, oh my goodness, that is a big one, because if I remember my patrol days when I was on patrol, Every time we went to a call or a scene and somebody noticed the camera, the alarm went out. He's got a gun. And every officer drew down on that person. Well, now it's different. Now he's got a gun and he's shopping at Walmart. He's shopping at H-E-B. What are you going to do? How are you going to handle it? We used to get calls for suspicious people. And the first thing an officer does when he arrives on a call is look for a weapon. It's very important. It's part of our jobs. We are police officers. That's what we do. We have to retrain our personnel. We're challenged with that every day. Technology is great. And at the Sheriff's Department, we have some of the latest and greatest. And we're training every day with it, improving the department, and making a better officer for retention. We offer all that, and we answer those questions that challenge us in this fashion.
Thank you. We'll get to body-worn cameras actually a little bit later, but Mr. Kirkpatrick, I don't know if you wanted to respond to some of the...
I will, and I'll just say that, I personally work every day out in the field. I'm out there every single day on US 77, working a very, very difficult task, and that we're out there, making a difference, that we're looking for the criminal element. We're a proactive group. We're not reactive, and so I can't even tell you the number of times that I've run across individuals who are currently carrying open carry, and they're very forthcoming about it. They tell us, hey, yes, I've got a gun in the car. We deal with it appropriately. We've had to adapt to the changes in laws, and I think what's really needs to be said is that we continue to talk about these challenges and things, and of course, at some point we reach a point at which I think we don't want to concentrate too many on one specific thing, because I think what we're also looking at is collectively what are we doing in terms of the county-wide, and I think we need to focus on that when we talk about child protective services, educating families in the CPS realm. Making sure that our community is safe from vandals, people abusing drugs, burglaries are on the rise in the county, and obviously, if not last but not least, it's the concern for the drunk drivers. And I can tell you that I'm sure my opponent would agree that we have we're tasked with a very big challenge of addressing all of these topics independently.
Mr. Gonzalez, any form of rebuttal?
Yes, please. I do agree with that, but one thing I disagree with is when you hear an officer describe a law enforcement entity as being proactive, that is less than 1% of our duties and daily time that occupies us. The police department is a reactive force. Some criminal activity has to happen in order for us to take action. When we are proactive, we're doing things like we did last night, National Night Out, bringing the community together, having them take part, and getting to know the officers. When we are proactive is when we get to know the people in the community that we serve. We are a reactive department, and you will know that when something happens in your home, you're assaulted, burglarized, something, that's the only time that you're calling a police officer to your home. Otherwise, you're not calling us. So we really are a reactive force, not a proactive. Proactive occupies very little of our time, and it's only at really special events. There's really nothing we can do on patrol other than patrol and be visible that really takes away from that.
Okay, thank you. Now, you both have talked about wanting to have a proactive department, and obviously with Kleberg County, we know that funding is an issue. We know that they've been through some hard times. We know that everybody's kind of making cuts everywhere, and I know that retention and attracting qualified candidates is an issue within the department. What steps can you take to address that issue of retention or attracting qualified individuals to help improve that situation within the sheriff's office?
I think the focus of that question is also how do we retain the officers? Well, number one, I think it starts by what I like to refer to as I guess you could say an organization or an administration who is actively, what I like to is say, that leaders choose to lead. And I think that when you look at a leader's qualifications and you look at what they are capable of, and you realize that when you want to take on a task of this nature, I think that when you look at that and we talk about how we would go forward in the future, and I know for a fact that as a leader personally, I think that those people in those positions should be confident in knowing that the next leader of the Sheriff's Department will genuinely care about their well-being, caring about how they genuinely are in that department, let alone the fact that I know that I will be vested with giving the people of that department a level of I guess you could say, personal development and personal care that each individual over there seems to need. And I think that leads to the whole issue of some of the reasons why I think these people leave is they feel like they're just not getting the training that they deserve. I don't think they feel like they're being treated fairly, and quite frankly, I think that comes in play when you start talking about scheduling, how they're treated as far as how their entire schedule is laid out, and sometimes these guys are working long shifts, they're working double time, that sort of thing. And I can tell you, even on the dispatcher side, I can tell you right now, after sitting in that chair, I have personally sat in the dispatcher's chair. And if you ever want to know, one of the hardest, by far, the toughest jobs in that sheriff's department right now, hands down, is dispatch. They go in, and I'm telling you, that takes a special skill set, and I got to hand it to them. Those men and women, mostly women that are there, do an outstanding job. They are tasked with doing a multitude of tasks, and unfortunately right now they've got a lot of unfilled positions.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, obviously you're aware of the vacant positions within the dispatch office. What steps would you take, or what would you do differently to address this issue of having fewer dispatchers within the department? Obviously, I imagine that has to be some kind of concern.
It is a very big concern, and I hope to turn that around shortly after I'm in office. I agree with my opponent in that I did my tour of duty in dispatch in KPD, and you talk about the volume of calls there and the phone ringing off the hook. That was tough. I won't do that. That requires a special skill set, yes. My hat's off to them, and they work long hours for minimal pay, and they deserve much better than that. We also talked about fairness. Since I've been with the Sheriff's Department, everything that I bring to the office is about being fair to the employee. I will not stand for an employee's rights to be trampled. I will not. It is not in my character, it is not in my upbringing, and it is not in my military training, in my years' experience in law enforcement. That is not one of the things that I will do. I will not allow it. Everybody will be treated with respect between personnel and upper management and on way down. Establishing the chain of command in the jail was one of my primary goals when I first came over. Due to that, there was a lot of cliques, a lot of little groupings of people that got together and did their own little thing. That's been eliminated. My jail right now is up to manpower, good in spirit. We've achieved success in the jail inspections by jail standards every single year. We've passed. Within the past 4 years, we have had surprise inspections. Within the past 3 years, we have passed with flying colors. That means no hits. In fact, we are being modeled as the jail standard, the jail that other jails need to come and check out what we're doing. We've made a lot of improvements. We've corrected a lot of things. I am not satisfied with managing in a 1970 style class environment. The jail is 19 years old.
Mr. Gonzalez, going back real quick to the dispatcher issue, bringing it back to that, why do you feel there are so many vacant positions within the department?
Once again, we did a study on that, and the majority of the questionnaires that were filled out, we went back, the commissioner asked for 2 years, Commissioner Lomas. We went back 5 years for questionnaires and resignation sheets. And the majority of them were leaving town, going for better pay. Better pay is about 80% of the problem. Dispatchers in KPD make $1 more. Now we got them up to pay, equal pay. Now KPD makes 10 cents more. So we're turning that around. We're slowly winning the war. Once we get them in, we plan to keep them by offering other benefits better than KPD. Eventually there is a plan in the works that I have to solve these problems with dispatching. But that has been the major issue, the pay issue. And we've tackled that.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, I'll pose the same question to you, actually. Why do you feel there are so many vacant positions within the dispatching department at the sheriff's office?
I'll go back and say it again. I mean, there's got to be a reason why there is a high turnover rate in that dispatch office, and I have to go back to one simple thing, and that's an administrative failure. I mean, it's bottom line. It's the way that these guys have had very difficult time retaining these personnel over the last, let's say, 8 years running, and we continue to see it time and time again. The problem has not been solved, and as your next sheriff, I'm going to solve it. I'm going to fix it.
What specifically would you do? I mean, are you looking at what steps would you take to address that particular issue?
Well, I think, and I hit on this earlier. These people, again, I'm going to reiterate this again because they're sometimes, and I see them being forced to work independent one shift and then literally go out for a few hours, and next thing you know, they're back in there working another 12 or 13-hour shift on top of that. And I can tell you that, granted, yes, I mean, there are, the dispatchers in the county don't see the call volumes as much as the girls or the guys and girls at the PD dispatcher level. They are night and day differences. But the same thing applies because there are so many things going on that you don't know when I guess you could say something is a tragic event happens, or there's a need for everything to kind of come to a stop, and then everything goes in emergency situations. But again, I think that we've gotten ourselves into a position at this sheriff's office, and I know that I heard it during the budget workshops that the county judge and the county commissioners have asked why you have positions that you are budgeted for, and yet you never filled them, and yet you've got all of this money tied up that that ends up leading to wasted taxpayer dollars that could have been spent somewhere else but wasn't spent because you didn't fill the positions.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, rebuttal.
What my opponent fails to realize that is with every change of administration, employees will leave the department. It happens on patrol, it happens in dispatch, and it happens in the jail. We have our dips and our highs. Eagle Ford Shale brought us down, knocked us on our knees because a lot of our employees left to go work in the oil fields. It happens. It happens to Kingsville Police Department. We lose personnel to Border Patrol. We lose them to the San Antonio Police Department, the Houston Police Department, Montgomery, all the other departments that have better pay. It is an ongoing issue back to when Sheriff Scarborough was in office. It is not something current to this administration. It is something we are currently dealing with dispatch. We survived the Ford Shale Exodus. Now we're dealing with dispatch. We're going to address it, we're going to make it better, and we're going to resolve it just like we always do. And I do have a plan for future retention and future enhancement of the dispatch department.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, I'll offer you another rebuttal.
And I'll say this because I think what's going on here is, if you'd stop and look at the sheriff's department right now, their dispatchers are held to approximately 6 months training. And I'm talking about a new hire dispatcher with zero experience. They're brought into the administration. they're sat in as I guess you could say, a ghost with an experienced dispatcher who ends up training them for a approximately 6-month period. My plan is we've got to accelerate these things, and we need to bring this down to a manageable area. I'm suggesting 3 months to get these personnel in place. I mean, I don't think there's time to waste in terms of thinking about, well, we have to worry about them going somewhere else. I'm looking at it right now saying, hey, we've got a problem. It needs to be addressed and fixed, and we're going to do it simply.
Thank you.
I have not seen a 3-month dispatcher, and if you'll go ask
It can be
KPD,
done.
50% of the dispatchers there
Trust
are from
me, it'll be
KS.
done.
So a 3-month, you're endangering officer safety.
Okay. Moving on real quick. You guys have talked a bit about salaries and guys leaving, people leaving for higher pay somewhere else. Obviously, the financial situation that Kleberg County is in. No employees have received any substantial pay raises in quite a while. What can the sheriff, or what would you do as sheriff to address that situation given the inadequate funding that the county has currently?
I think and every time we see this, I think a lot of it is, when you stop and look at it, the budget that's put forth in the administration, that's part of a planning overall county budget when they talk about how we're going to put together the department. And of course, yeah, we're going to have to see those things. Again, there comes a point where we don't want to put ourselves in a position where you're compromising some of the things like public safety. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to have those essential personnel in place. But again, there's always room for improvement. And I believe that in a time where the constraints of the overall county budget are there, I believe that we have to be team players and work with the commissioners against the budget, and not looking at it as a single entity, but looking at it as an entire project, I guess you could say, with the sheriff's department and the others. And I guarantee you that my administration will put together a plan to go work hand in hand with our county commissioners, our county judge. I know for a fact that our county judge has had several suggestions on how to save money in that department, and I have yet to see the sheriff or the administration sit down and actively participate in those conversations.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
Well, on behalf of the sheriff and myself, we've never had the county judge ask us to sit down, and any ideas that he may have on how to save money just haven't arisen. I will tell you this, in the 8 years that I've been there, not only have we managed our budget, every year has been cut, and we have also given back money every year. We've stayed within budget, we've managed it very well, we've given back money, and we have saved money. Inmate housing alone was scheduled to be a $500,000, $500,000 operation on a yearly basis, a yearly expense. We cut that down to practically zero. That and so many other achievements that we have done. We have included a water softener. We've gone through a 3-boiler system. All of this to save the structural integrity of the jail, which is a 19-year-old building that is starting to show the signs of its age. There's so many things that we've already done. And as far as the budget is concerned, there's no complaints about the budget. Every year we give money back. We stay within budget. We're one of the few departments that stays within budget.
You touched on the Kleberg County Jail and its need for improvements. Obviously, it is an aging facility.
It is an aging facility.
What particular steps or what specific steps would you take to maybe address those issues, again, given how financially difficult, how the finances are inadequate right now with the county?
Unfortunately, the cost of the repairs to the building itself are something that we're just going to have to do. The jail was built with cast iron pipes that are beginning to leak, as evidenced by the leak and the smell in the court annex. We're replacing them with brand new materials, going to PVC when we can. The electrical wiring, I don't know how the jail passed inspection, because the deeper I dig, the more problems I find. Some of the wiring was burning up some of the circuit boards within the jail and some of the systems in the power outlets. And what we determined was that the wiring gauge was too small for the capacity for what it was drawing. So a lot of the corrections that we need to do are just gonna have to be made. We are constantly looking for grants. Before I came to the department, there was only one grant active, and it was a grant that was no longer being pursued. We put together a team of grant writers. Currently, we have 2 active grant writers that have taken over that position. And as you can see, the sheriff likes to brag about the millions of dollars that have come into the department and helped the county out in overtime. The task force is beneficiary of some of those monies. You know, not to mention the surrounding counties and Kingsville Police Department also. So we're very proactive when it comes to saving the county and the taxpayer money. And that will continue to be my mode of operandi once I get into office.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, I'll pose the same question to you about the jail.
Of course, the Texas jail standards, they are going to, they're going to inspect those jails periodically, and yes, they're going to have to pass inspections. So yes, those things will be addressed, and we will have to work and find new ways of saving money. But here's what I also believe, and this gets maybe on the same point, but different topic of it, but we're still talking about the jail and talking about trying to save some of this money. And I believe that, it's essential that we work with some of the local courts to ensure that the long-term placements of offenders that do time locally, we try to minimize that, depending on whether they are, delays by attorneys, court dockets, or whatever. That cost is ultimately passed on to the taxpayer. And so what we've got to do is try to find new methods and ways to get these folks dealt with, get them out of the jail as soon as possible. Now, granted, there's still going to be people that absolutely we can't get rid of. We got to keep them in there. But when they stay longer than they should, because of these delays and some of these court dockets and stuff, that's what that ends up costing, or what I would call unwarranted costs. And I believe it's time that we sit down with these attorneys, we sit down with the judges of every court, and we have these discussions of how to come up with new ways of getting these individuals out.
Mr. Gonzalez, please.
Now, that's funny. My opponent is not listening. He is not doing his homework. Our jail capacity is 160, currently with the female addition. The female holds 48. The male section holds 112. Currently, there's 90 total inmates. He's not paying attention. When I first got to the sheriff's office 8 years ago, we had a jail population that was out of control. We were paying, in essence, as I mentioned earlier, we were headed towards a $500,000 a year inmate jail housing. Our budget for this year was $10,000. We have taken care of the problem. We did this years ago. Where has he been?
Sir, your budget was $2.2 million, if I'm correct.
Not the entire budget. We're talking about, you mentioned inmate housing.
We're talking about the
and that's what
entire
we're talking
budget,
about.
sir. We're talking about the entire thing.
So what's that got to do with inmate housing?
It
You're
has
saying it's
everything
out of
to do with
control.
it,
You're
because-
wanting, we established
Gentlemen,
relations with the district
no talking
judge,
over
the
each other.
district attorney, the county clerk, the county court at law, parole, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Our population is 90. We don't house inmates out. We don't have that problem anymore. This is average for a city of our size, a county of our size, 90 inmates. And we work with these departments to get them out as quickly as possible. We established that. It wasn't being done before. When I got there, it was out of control. It is well within our limits now.
Thank you. Mr. Kirkpatrick, I'll give you a chance to respond.
Mr. Gonzalez talks about that, and there's always room for improvement, always. And I got to tell you that, there's half a dozen people in there that sometimes go through the loops. I personally have filed cases where people have had to stay, and they get caught up in the system because of court delays or whatever reason is. Maybe it's their attorney, and they're stuck in there, and they're not doing anything but sitting there. And you know what? Ultimately, each and every one of us, each one of you pays that bill for whether it be health issues, whatever the case is. We've got health costs rising at an astronomical rate. Somebody's got to pay the bill. And I'm saying that we have got to work with these folks and get them processed and get them out quicker.
Thank you.
Sir, you file one,
Mr.
you file 1 or 2 cases a year?
Oh,
Mr.
I've filed
Gonzalez?
more than that, sir. In the last year in the task
Gentlemen,
force,
we're
we
gonna-
seized $5.3 million in seizures.
No, you said aye.
Gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and move on. Just keep on schedule here. We're going to go ahead and take a move, actually, to another issue. We obviously know that the Highway 77 is a corridor for human smuggling and drug trafficking. As sheriff, what steps would you take to ensure that the county is protected against individuals who are coming through either smuggling drugs or smuggling undocumented immigrants?
Well, you know, sir, I've been involved in this for 23 years. Believe me, it's I would say is probably my forte, and I got to be honest with you. You know, it's a concern that we have got to deal with. A lot of people argue, well, they're just pass-through people, and I will tell you that that is not the issue. There are people that are doing this kind of thing that are directly affecting our community. You know, I have an extensive experience in drug trafficking and human smuggling as a part of the sheriff's office when I worked there before, including the task force, which I do now. And I got to tell you, you know, it's we have to ensure the cooperation with all of our law enforcement, not just one particular group or bunch. This is inclusive of everybody, which includes the Border Patrol, game wardens, and you know, a cooperation and an effective action in all of this that affect our community.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez, rebuttal?
That is correct. That is his forte. And when I'm sheriff and he's working for me, he's going to enjoy his forte a lot. He's going to thrive under his forte. We have incorporated the help of the Border Patrol. We meet with them on a monthly basis at the naval base. We meet with the game wardens. We even established a cooperation agreement with some of the ranchers. They come in to our meetings and we share intel and information. We're on top of that. We're proactive in it. We have ICE representatives that come down and we meet with them. We also hold meetings with the Texas Ranger. Everybody's involved in this. We are very proactive on the roads, patrolling at night, and we have a lot of traffic stops that lead on to human smuggling, which is different from human trafficking. Human smuggling is the bringing of people across an international border for purposes of whatever. And human trafficking is when you force them to work, as in the sex slave market and stuff like that. But we are very proactive in that area, and he is going to thrive under my leadership.
Mr. Gonzalez, do you feel that the Sheriff's Department does enough interdiction to address the issue of human trafficking and drug smuggling?
We can never do enough. We can never, ever, ever do enough. There's always something else that we can do. We do that by hiring the right people, giving them the proper training, and allowing them the freedom to do their job. And that is what I am going to do. Bring in good people, train them well, and let them do their job.
Mr.
You know, my opponent here talked about these intel meetings that he has. I'm going to be quite frank with you. Those intel meetings are put on by CBP and the Border Patrol. The Sheriff's Office, included of the task force, various other law enforcement entities are all part of that. And yes, ranch owners participate in it. I know that I've been a part of those meetings as well. And I got to tell you, you know, it's one of those things that's the whole idea, is that we share intel amongst one another. And as far as it goes, you know, again, you're talking about, you know, when you do interdiction, drug interdiction, human smuggling interdiction, those types of things are, again, like I was saying about the dispatchers, that is a very specific skill set. And I got to tell you, you know, you currently, sir, don't have anybody in your office right now that can do the job that we have done consistently over and over and over again.
Mr. Gonzalez, rebuttal?
Real quick. We currently have officers that constantly stop traffic that leads to absconding aliens, and we do a good job of capturing them.
Now, the obviously, you mentioned that they lack individuals who have that particular skill set. We all know that Kleberg County now is home to the South Texas Specialized Crimes and Narcotics Task
Yes.
Force, of which you are a member. Would you be in favor of having the task force be under the Sheriff's Department?
I would, and I'll tell you why, but I think there's some caveats to it. First of all, the Sheriff's Office has a collective bargaining agreement, and I would say, as the next sheriff, I would give the task force that option if they choose to do so, let alone the decision by the county commissioners. If that is a direction that they would want to go in, I think that everybody could sit down and discuss it if that's the option and the direction that they would like to take.
Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, same question to you.
Yes, sir. The integration of the task force into the Sheriff's Department is a good idea. I'm all for it. I support it. I have a plan to do it. They will be part of the bargaining association that we have, and they will be integral members of the Kleberg County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, thank you. Changing gears once again, you mentioned earlier body cameras, and you mentioned how transparency was a key component of a good sheriff's office and being transparent with the public. I posed the question to you guys is, do you support the use of body cameras for your officers, and how would you pay for them?
Well, currently, I'll be very, very honest with you here. The task force is one of the first entities to employ and deploy body cameras. We currently use them every day, and so I'm 100% in support of having body cameras on our officers. Paying for it, well, again, what better way to pay for it with drug money? Again, I think it's one of those things that it's a necessary instrument that we need. We need to have them on our officers, and again, it leads to transparency and safety of let alone the officer, but of what else is going on behind the scenes, and certainly for our courts, that we can give that kind of information to them, and they have an effective, it's a better effective tool when they are presenting these cases to court, and we're sitting down and seeing exactly what the officer sees from his point of view.
Now, Mr. Gonzalez, I know you already expressed your support for having body cameras for your deputies, but how would you go about paying for those devices, given the county's financial situation? And obviously there's going to be a cost for storage and things of that nature. How would you seek to address that funding issue?
Well, believe it or not, we've already addressed it. We've already bought them. We've already paid for them out of chapter money with the help of the district attorney. We've already established them. We have established policy. It is a constant, and there is no exceptions. Officers will wear them. They will be on 8 hours per shift, or however long the shift is. They will be downloaded daily, and certain other things that need to happen with them. We have established a central server within our server system to just take those video recordings, and we keep them for longer than 90 days. So we've already addressed that situation. We're there. Technology is our friend.
Thank you. Now, obviously, when keeping with the body cameras, you obviously talk about the transparency and things of that nature. What would you make a priority to build upon the relationship with the community and developing that rapport and that bond with the community to help instill, I guess, a sense of trust? Because I know, obviously, you have the backlash against officers across the nation. What steps would you take to develop a stronger relationship with local law enforcement and the community?
Well, I think also, I think you talk about a couple points there, and one that is, if everybody can agree that there's going to be some point in time that you've got police officers that are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and I will submit to you that if that's the case, then and they are doing something that's against the law or against procedures, they're going to be dealt with immediately. They would be prosecuted for criminal wrongdoing, and again, I think that it reiterates what you said. We're talking about transparency and having the public view what police are doing and the steps that they're taking.
Thank you. Mr. Gonzalez?
That is correct. As far as I've already said this before. We plan to have a board of civilians also review some of the issues with the police department, like the Kleberg County Sheriff's Office, when an officer's complained on. We plan to be transparent, make the public a part of our actions. There's certain limitations to it, but those can be addressed later on. The cameras are a go. I don't know what else to say about it other than we've already established them within our department. We're ahead of the times.
Okay. Now, we've reached the audience question portion of our discussion, and we have a few, so I'm going to select a couple here to go and present to you guys. This first one is actually for the both of you. What is your plan to unify law enforcement in this county?
Well, I tell you what, it's sometimes I think it's more than a big picture, and that is, I think it's important that we look at this from the aspect of, look, we're going to sit down and talk to every single law enforcement entity. I mean, where else in Kleberg County? You have, here in this county, we are blessed with a large number of law enforcement agencies, from the constables, DPS, the Border Patrol, game wardens, and so on and so forth. There is a ton of law enforcement that is unique to this area that we don't see anywhere else. And everybody wants to talk about unification and communication and being able to work together, but it's actually taking the step to do it. And I think a lot of it has to do with taking the initiative of going out there and making it, I guess you could say, bearing the ego and just going out there and saying, hey, look, how can we help each other? How can we take this task on? And we should be working together with everybody and not having to worry about if there's issues with communications, if there's issues with, having to, right now I can tell you that there's a current issue with the task force operating on the sheriff's radio system. Now we're having to go through different avenues, having to go outside of Kleberg County and Kennedy County to communicate. I just don't understand why our sheriff and their administration refuse to allow the task force to operate on their radio frequency when you're talking, my opponent wants to talk about, officer safety and officer lives. Well, I mean, what more can you say about it? And yet that's not working with each other. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to work with each other. We're here to help each other.
Mr. Gonzalez, I'll pose the same question to you and offer you a chance to respond.
Exactly. The question was the unification of law enforcement. I bring change to this office. I am not the one that's currently issuing the policy, but I will bring you change. Change is scary. Prepare to be scared. There are things that as my opponent mentioned, there's so many different law enforcement entities in this county that we overlap on our duties and overlap on the actions that we take. What he fails to provide you is with a plan. I have a plan. Once we integrate the task force into the sheriff's department, that's one step, baby step one. I plan to also hopefully talk to the city, get them to agree and unify dispatch, a combined dispatch for all of the county needs. Secondly, saving the taxpayer money all along the way. Every step saves the taxpayer money. Thirdly, there are offices in law enforcement today that don't need to exist because they overlap so blatantly with the duties of the sheriff's department. We will change that. We will save the taxpayer money. We will manage those departments within the sheriff's department. All along towards the answer of the unification of law enforcement under one responsible and popularly elected sheriff that knows his job and knows what the county needs. Thank you.
Mr. Kirkpatrick, response?
And I think my opponent's talking about is and he talks about and addresses what they call a combined dispatch and plan. And he's talking about merging, or if I say this correctly, he's talking about merging the communication similar to what goes on in Corpus Christi. That is the plan itself is probably, I would agree, is probably solid, but the problem is that ultimately it's going to come down to who's going to control it, for one, and number two, who's going to pay for it. And if you don't think that the taxpayers are going to have to saddle that up, then guys, be prepared, because it is. Somebody's going to have to pay for the building, somebody's going to have to pay for the training, and somebody's going to have to pay for the personnel to run it. Unless, of course, my opponent has a different idea.
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes. Who's going to pay for it? Nobody. The systems are already in place. 2 buildings, Kingsville Police Department, Sheriff's Office. Primary communications, secondary in case one goes down, as we have always operated. There's no mystery in this. There's no hidden agenda. It's right there in front of you. Lack of planning on my opponent's side. There's no training that's involved. We've trained the same dispatchers. They communicate with the same officers. We are just combining our resources instead of overlapping them and saving the taxpayer money. Simple solution to a complex problem.
Now, the last question that we have tonight is actually based on the recent events that are nationwide. You have police coming under fire for what people deem to be excessive violence, unnecessary violence. The question is, what type of training would you do for the sheriff's office to avoid unnecessary violence? Mr. Gonzalez, I'll let you take the lead on that.
The training is out there. There is racial sensitivity training. There is all sorts of training for communications with people. There is all sorts of training that we can go to and events and things. And there's programs that we can instill within our own department to reach out to the community, to meet with them, to get them to recognize the officers so that the officers also know who they're dealing with on a one-to-one basis. The community. That has been very important to me. There was a couple of years ago and currently there's something called campus cops, community policing and stuff like that. Those were popular terms. I'm trying to bring some of the best ideas under those programs into office, making sure that my officers go out and meet the community and implement outreach programs that bring the community in so that you can recognize the job that we do and get a feel for the officers, and the officers can get a feel for the community. The violence and unrest that has occurred nationwide, that is something I hope never happens here. But we have a college, we have a naval base, and we have a chemical plant. All of those are points of concern. We have a water supply system. Things can get easily poisoned, exploded, and stuff like that. But thankfully, that has never happened and hopefully never will. Other than a school shooter and things that happen at school, we have answered calls for bomb threats and things like that, which you all are aware of. We have never had a major incident. And we keep crossing our fingers that we never will. Every police officer will tell you the last thing he wants is violence. Well, that's the last thing I want. A tragedy to happen, a mass tragedy. So we will train accordingly to prepare for that in case of the event that it does happen, and we will train to prevent that it doesn't happen. And the key factor on those issues right there, on that issue right there, is you, the community, working with us. I plan to establish a network on communications between law enforcement and the community that'll be instant up to the minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Mr. Kirkpatrick, I pose the same question to you.
We talk about, some of the things that, in training, and I personally am 100% behind training. I am a trainer. I do it all the time. And I know that these guys deserve the best training that's out there, and we will provide them with that unconditionally. Secondly, I think all of us, what we have to see is and understand is the public perception, and believe me, it's a big deal today. My plan is to change the public perception about the department. We have to be more efficient in how we present that to the public. I think a lot of us have realized that there's numerous county residents that have informed me that sometimes their cases are never solved or seldom solved once the initial reports are taken. I am an investigator, and while that we all can agree that not every case can be solved immediately, we can follow up and especially follow-ups and conduct those follow-ups with these victims and advise them of their changes and advise them that their situation is equally important and receives the attention that it deserves. Again, we're talking about building trust in the community. I believe that's exactly where we should be.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that actually concludes this forum for these two candidates. So why don't you go ahead and give a round of applause to our two candidates tonight. We would like to thank you very much for coming out tonight and giving your time to this particular event. And our goal with the event was to help you become informed and in order to head to the polls and make a decision that is informed. So thank you very much for giving your time for being here tonight, and have a safe trip home.
Thank you.